The Senate is looking forward to getting it. Mitch McConnell knows how to do things, and I think we're going to have some really great health care for a long time.
President Trump last night celebrating House passage of repeal and replace and looking forward to another victory in the Senate. Let's bring in our panel. Steve Hayes, editor-in-chief for the Weekly Standard. A.B. Stoddard of Real Clear Politics. Jason Riley, Wall Street Journal columnist. And Charles Hurt of the Washington Times. Well, Steve, let me start with you. President Trump celebrating victory in the House, but the Senate's going to be a different matter, tougher to get it through. How tough?
I think very tough. I mean, there's no question this is a big victory for Donald Trump and for Paul Ryan and for House Republicans, but it's a temporary victory. The Senate has indicated, we've already seen that they will basically be starting from scratch, starting over. It's this working group of 13 Republican senators are going to be working to put this together. But they're going to have to come up with a bill that meets this 50-vote threshold. By pleasing camps that are arguably even more polarized than Republicans in the House of Representatives. You have Bill Cassidy and Susan Collins on the one side, the moderate side, who seem to have bought many of the arguments and the basic architecture and structure of Obamacare. And then on the other side, you've got people like Rand Paul and Tom Cotton, Mike Lee, and others who want to rip Obamacare up root and branch. I think that's going to be a huge challenge, knowing that they can only lose those couple votes.
A.B. is one of our Capitol Hill resident watchers. I want to talk about this division because on the one hand, you've got somebody like Rand Paul who really doesn't like government regulation of the healthcare industry. On the other hand, you have another moderate, I'll talk about, Rob Portman, who's seen hundreds of thousands of voters in his state, residents in his state, but especially voters who have gained health care coverage under expanded Medicaid. How do you get something that they can both sign on to, and how long do you think it's going to take in the Senate?
I don't know if you can get something that they both camps sign on to, and it'll take a long time. That Medicaid
wait, what's
expansion,
a long time?
It could take the rest of the year. That Medicaid expansion is very important to not only just Ohioans, but states like Ohio, where there's a growing, burgeoning opioid addiction crisis, and more people were able to be helped by the Medicaid expansion. So there are going to be states that are full of Trump voters that will be very hard to take the Medicaid expansion away from in 2020, which the current legislation does. Now, what Steve is talking about, if I could absolutely see President Trump sitting down with Rob Portman and saying, you have whatever you want, and he gets Susan Collins and he basically crafts a moderate bill. They could get Senator Joe Manchin, a Democrat from West Virginia, Senator Joe Donnelly, maybe from Indiana, a couple of Democrats up in Trump states. But they lose enough of them to lose Rand Paul, Mike Lee, and Ted Cruz. Guess what happens? It goes back to the House, and the Freedom Caucus will bail on it. I see a Senate deal. I don't see something that gets back to the House. Okay,
well, let's talk about that. Let's assume they hit the sweet spot and they get something that Rand Paul and Rob Portman can sign on to. Well, you got to do something like that, Jason. You can only lose two Republicans. But let's assume for a second you get it. Now you got to bring it back to the House. You've got to have an old-fashioned conference committee, Senate negotiators, House negotiators, and they got to try to find some point of agreement. Is there one?
Well, I think they can all agree that if this goes down, we wind up with Obamacare, and they own it, and voters will punish them for that. That is something they have been promising for 7 years or so. We're going to repeal Obamacare. We're going to replace it. The House got the ball running, and they have to come through on that promise. I think one way you help to bring them together is to convince them that this is more than just a health care bill. This is entitlement reform. I mean, the Medicare, the Medicaid part of this, I should say, gets at entitlement. This will cut the increase in Medicaid. If you care about deficits, you should be for this. This also gets the ball rolling on tax reform. It eliminates all of these or almost all of the Obamacare tax increases that happened with that package, which is hurting middle-class savers, which is hurting small businesses trying to grow. So this is more than just health care. And I think looking at it in that broader context might, as well as the hardcore political reality of not doing anything here, I think could concentrate some minds on the right.
Realistically, do you think, though, that if you're a senator from Ohio, and A.B. talked about thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people in some of these states have gained coverage. I understand entitlement reform, but isn't that going to be a tough sell to them to say that they may lose their coverage because of this?
It's a tough sell, but I don't know that it'll be a deal breaker, but it'll definitely be a tough sell for someone like Rob Portman. Yeah.
President Trump met with Australia's Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull last night, and the subject of health care reform came up. Take a look.
Right now, Obamacare is failing. We have a failing health care. I shouldn't say this to our great gentleman and my friend from Australia, because you have better health care than we do.
Well, that started quite a storm because Liberal Democrats noted the fact that Australia's health care system is government-run, single-payer, universal coverage like Canada, like Britain. Charlie, Democrats say that, like Bernie Sanders, say the president committed what's called a gaffe in Washington. He accidentally told the truth.
Sure. Well, and as often the case, Donald Trump is exactly right. And the big news here...
What do you mean he's right?
Well, because the biggest news out of Republicans passing that bill is that they have ceded the fight against socialized medicine in America. We now have two parties both agree that we should have socialized medicine in this country, to varying degrees maybe, but nobody is making the fight anymore the way they did against Obamacare, that we shouldn't have the government running our health care.
So wait, you're saying that you believe that the Republicans with the health care bill that the president's talking about and the House Freedom Caucus is talking about, that they caved?
Absolutely, and from the beginning, Donald Trump is not a conservative, and he's never been a conservative. That's not what he is. He is a deal maker, and he wants to make a deal. And the thing that I find so fascinating about all this is that Republicans have come all this way around to agreeing, with the Democratic vision of how to deal with health care. And Democrats aren't involved in any of it. They haven't. Republicans have met them 75% of the way. Democrats haven't met them even 30% of the way. They're just sitting on their hands and refusing to do anything to fix their bill.
Jason?
Well, I don't think the president is correct on this matter in terms of a better health care system. We don't know how you're measuring better. Is it life expectancy? Is it cost? Is it the number of people insured? I will tell you that...
How about this big basic question of whether it's socialized medicine, whether this is the government-controlled medicine?
Well, again, we cannot make the perfect the enemy of the good here. If we were starting from scratch and building a health care system, we wouldn't have the tax credits. We wouldn't have the Medicaid expansion stuff to worry with. But we're not starting from scratch. We're starting from Obamacare. And you have to take what you can get incrementally, given the hand you're dealt. So, I don't agree with that, no.
Very briefly, it's tough to undo an entitlement.
It is. No, I mean, this is one of the real lessons of this entire thing, and this goes to Jason's earlier point about Medicaid. I mean, we haven't had much of a discussion of who's been put on Medicaid. I mean, you have a lot of able-bodied working adults who have been put on Medicaid and are now entitled to this program sort of in perpetuity unless Republicans can roll it back.
All right. We have